This segment brought to you by the Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center in Oakley.
Since this is our wildlife segment, I thought I would move over and show you our wildlife this morning. Look at that owl. It could fly off at any minute, but probably not since he's plastic. Wildlife is all about getting outdoors and exploring Kansas, and so our friend Nick Abt, who did the commercial for the Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center, does tons of documentaries on how beautiful the state of Kansas is, and he's done a documentary, Exploration Kansas, and we hope there's more to come. And this has our friends Jim Mattson, Mike Everhart, and Rex Buchanan. So we're going to share the link on the bottom of the screen so you can see the whole thing, but this is just a sampling of what you'll see.
Gyp hills are a very different environment. They're much older than mostly what we've been talking about. These are rocks that were deposited during the Permian period of geologic history, a couple 100 million years ago. During that time period, that area that's covered by the Gyp hills is sort of an embayment that water could flow into, and at times that water, the source of that water got cut off, that water would evaporate and it would leave behind rock units that geologists call, for obvious reasons, evaporites. So things like, probably the best known one is salt. But gypsum and other kinds of rocks get deposited at the bottom of that old embayment, and they underlie a lot of Kansas. Now, in some places they're in the subsurface. That salt is mined in Hutchinson and Lyons and Canopolis. But where you see those rocks exposed at the surface is the red hills in that area down around, particularly Medicine Lodge and on to the west. There, the Gyp hills cap those hills. Again, it's gypsum that when it was deposited, those are flat-lying rocks. Differential erosion then removed rock in between the hills, so it sculpted these hills. What's really making them striking is partly the way the formations look, but also their color. That, in addition to being known as the Gyp hills, it's also known as the red hills, because very many of those rocks that are deposited, not so much the gypsums, but the siltstones and the sandstones, are stained red by iron oxide. So if you drive throughout those hills, they have a deep red, very striking color. So you get this combination of butte and mesa topography from the gypsum that is capping the tops of those hills, and then the stained iron oxide color just forms a very dramatic landscape. Really, in many respects, looks more like Arizona and New Mexico than it does Kansas. Clark County is kind of spectacular, partly because there's deep erosional features there, and so a steep-sided canyon. Especially if you come into Clark County State Lake from the west, it's like you don't even know this exists, and all of a sudden the country just drops off and forms this canyon. The other thing that's really spectacular in a geologic sense about Clark County State Lake is how many different units you can see in place in a small amount of area there. Some hills that are capped by Ogallala Formation not very far away, along with all these Permian rocks that are there, and I have to go back and check, but I think there are even some Cretaceous things that crop out there as well. So really within the space of almost sometimes a few hundred yards, you can see 200 million years worth of geologic history. Kansas, has this reputation as being fairly flat and featureless and not very, interesting geologically. And certainly there are parts of the high plains in the rest of the state where I'd say, yeah, I can understand that reputation. What I would say to people is get off the big highways, get off of I-70, get off the turnpike, open your eyes, take a little bit of time, and see what's out there.
The prairie is kind of an acquired taste. We don't have huge mountains, we don't have ocean beaches and whatnot, but the prairie is appreciated in its details, in its fine details, and sometimes you have to actually get down at that level in order to appreciate it fully, appreciate all the variety of pollinating insects and other insects that live there, the variety of flowering plants, over 800 flowering plant species in Kansas alone. and most of those are prairie species, either tallgrass or shortgrass prairie species. Each one has figured out how to live here. Each one has learned through trial and error and over the millennia what it takes to survive in this place, and each one has valuable lessons to teach us about how we can survive here too.